All right, so now that the announcements have pretty much been done, I'm gonna really quickly go over the Ggplot 2 cheat sheet, and we can then move forward. Let me see, what's the easiest way? Let's see, Ggplot cheat sheet. This is just if I ever need to look it up quickly, I just like lazily search it this way. This one, yeah, it looks pretty much similar to the one that I have. They should generally look approximately like this. So as I had mentioned, Ggplot is called or the GG and Ggplot means the grammar of graphics. And within the grammar of graphics, there's three essential components. There's the data set, there's the coordinate system, and there's the geometries. And we covered that yesterday, and we can see a couple of examples within the course materials. What the Ggplot cheat sheet does is it shows you the different geometries that you can use that are associated with this cheat sheet. And they'll show you these different options that could be useful for different types of data visualization. For example, if you are trying to visualize or quantify one variable, so one continuous variable, you want to set your geometry, or sorry, you want to set your first two parameters with this Ggplot function. You tell it the data set, in this case, they're using a miles per gallon data set, which is built into R. And then within the aesthetics, they tell it what the one variable is to look for. So this is the bare minimum component in order to get this one variable plot to work. And they just call this A. So for every geometry, they have their A, which is this piece right here. So Ggplot plus, this is the plus symbol that we've seen in previous examples, the geometry that they're covering. So in this case, you can create histograms, you can create like kind of line plots that follow the shape of your histogram. You can create dot plots, density plots with different options, area plots with different options. And usually within the cheat sheet, they'll tell you what the required thing, like we noticed that in the geom violin plot, there was something that was required to add in, otherwise it wouldn't work. Same thing for the geom dot plot, same thing for geom smooth. There's something that's required for some of them. So whatever required component is usually indicated in the description, and they'll give an example of the syntax below. So you'll see geom histogram, aesthetics. You know, if someone gives an additional aesthetic option, you'll see it written in here. Same thing for the two variables. So there's ways of visualizing continuous X or continuous Y variables, discrete X or discrete Y variables. And you have these different options, and it's the same principle here. Here you have this letter indicator, but here's your major components, the Ggplot, the data set that's being used, and the aesthetics that are being used. Here in this case, this is the X variable, this is the Y variable, and then plus any geometry associated with it. So you can see that there's different types of scatter plots that you can create. Geom smooth is the one that we used, but there's a number of other options that you can use in this way.
Ibrahim?
Yes.
Geom smooth, what is alpha after Y?
That is an awesome question. Alpha is the level of transparency of the or opacity of the layer that you've added. So one of the things that you can do is you can add multiple layers on top of one another in order to see, like, for example, if you want to see geom smooth, but you also want to see a scatter plot of the points on top of that, you can put the scatter plot of points by putting this as your first layer plus geom smooth, and you can set the alpha lower, like alpha is usually measured on a scale of 1. So if you have alpha 0.5, it's like 50% transparent. So you can see this transparent model line on top of the scatter plot. Does that help?
Thank you.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions about the Ggplot cheat sheet? Please interrupt me if you do have additional questions. You'll see that there are other ways to add statistics on here. We use the stat summary function before. There's a variety of options that you can kind of dig through here. Sometimes if it's like not totally clear what one of these options does, I generally just search it on a web browser and look to see if it's described in somebody else's forum. There's a lot of great explanations online. There was also a question about how to modify the axes. And the way to do that is by using the scale X or scale Y. So here they have an asterisk here. You can use either X or Y aesthetics for these different scale functions. And you can modulate the variables in a variety of ways using these scale functions. But again, some of this stuff, I should say, most of this stuff is not like absolutely intuitive when you're working in your own coding practice. Oftentimes, like I just search what I'm trying to do, and there will be a variety of options, and I sometimes have to test, a couple of different options to get something to work. So that's totally normal. So like if you like are working on things and you're getting stuck, like just don't worry, it does take some time. There's a lot of resources to find help. I pointed out some of them in my email to everyone this morning. Cool. So it sounds like there aren't more questions about the cheat sheet. I'm going to go back to our cloud space. Throw up a thumbs up or a reaction if you were able to load part 2 and you have a similar screen to me. So I got one. We got some claps, a couple of thumbs. Okay. If you are stuck and not able to get part 2 loaded, throw up a shocked expression. All right. Don't see any shocked expressions. All right. Cool. So I'm going to move forward with the overview of our Markdown. So what we have here in our Markdown, it is, or what we have here in part 2 is I created it in an Our Markdown document. So for every Our Markdown document, I'm just going to show you this as an example. You don't have to do this. You can just open one. Creating Our Markdown documents requires updated version of some packages. Usually when I see something like this, I'll just hit yes and let it load the packages for to make sure that it works properly. That might take some time. And our Markdown document starts with this heading component, which you'll see with these 3 dashes. The headings won't work if they're outside, or these kind of like, I call them headings, but they're not actually headings. It's like document, like main document features. You can title the document. I'm just going to call this sample just because I'm showing this. The installing the packages worked, and now this is the interface that you get when you create a new Our Markdown document. So I'm going to call it sample. Author is going to be me, lol. And then there's different output formats. HTML creates an HTML file that's openable in a web browser when you finally kind of knit your document. So this is useful. There's also PDF documents, or you can use Our Markdown to create Word documents. As I'd mentioned, this is a useful way of creating reports and embedding code into your report. So there's different output formats. We're using HTML for now. So when you get, so you'll see mine opened up Untitled 1. We can see that because the file is not yet titled, our Markdown document automatically populates these options here. You'll see output here, and then there's different ways of customizing your our Markdown document. We'll see that in part 2. It comes with some infrastructure here, but we're going to go over that in detail in a little bit. That's how you create an R Markdown document. I have filled in a lot of these details later. Within in our Markdown document, you can create headings. I'm going to knit the document in just a second. This is what you do when you are stitching together or creating your report. And you'll see how that looks like in a second. You can create headings using the hashtag. So remember, before we were using these little hashtag symbols or the # symbols to create notes. Within our Markdown, it's a little bit different. You can create headings that you can use to create a table of contents using these # symbols. So if I wanted to create heading 2, heading 3, we'll see how that looks right now. So I know that this our Markdown work should knit. So if you want to, you can just give it a shot and knit the document. I'm going to knit and show what it looks like to knit it. So sometimes I have a pop-up blocker, so it'll give you a little warning. I just usually hit for RStudio Cloud try again, and it'll create the pop-up. So so this is what my report looks like in its HTML format. We can see the title of the document. In this case, it was Intro to R. It'll give you the author of the document, which we're just calling UCLA Collaboratory, the date that you put, and the output creates the format of the document here. I have a table of contents. So if we kind of look behind the window here, we can see table of contents true, or TOC true, TOC float true. So that just says that the table of contents will exist, and TOC float means the table of contents will move with the document. Well, the useful thing about the table of contents is you can navigate to different headings. That's why it's important in our Markdown documents to create headings. And you can see here that I can embed code in a variety of ways. And we'll talk about these code, what we call as code chunks in just a second. So here we have the different headings. I can choose to show the code, or I can choose to hide the code. And we'll see how those options work in a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to close this for now. Yes, every additional # makes a new subheading. So we have an error. Someone's getting error output in quotes object not found when creating the R Markdown file. That's it could be that are other people getting this error as well? I wonder if it's like just a restart RStudio Cloud situation like we were running into before. Okay. So some other people are getting this this error.
Is that in RStudio Cloud or
RStudio good question.
Desktop?
Yeah.
Oh.
Cloud.
Yeah, I've never seen that error on the desktop version.
Okay.
And when you run it, you're not getting that error.
No, I'm not. So someone said, can you go over how to make the untitled RMD file again? Yes, I can. Yeah, it could be that those packages for creating the untitled RMD file, the ones that they asked me to install, might be important for the Our Markdown file. If everyone wants to can go through this exercise with me, maybe this will fix that error. I will talk about code chunks in just a second. So if you click on the little plus symbol with the square and click on Our Markdown, it'll kind of give you the same warning that that I had. Go ahead and install those packages if it gives you that warning, and then you can customize the Our Markdown document in the pop-up window that appears. And then you can hit OK to create the new file or cancel if you're not planning on doing that. But if it asks you to install some packages, go ahead and try that. I think that might actually fix that issue. So while people are working on that, I'm going to talk a little bit about code chunks. So you'll notice that I don't have any code written in here quite yet. It's just text here. And one of the nice things about creating these reports is you could just put text without having that pound sign and just use it as text. When you click the knit button, as I showed, it'll generate that document. Hopefully, if people install those other packages, it will load or the document that we have, the original document will knit. In order to embed code, you can create what are called code chunks. And this is the way that you create code chunks. So I have an example of a code chunk below, but I'll just type out how you create one right now. So the way to do it, so there's this little like tick mark, which is usually to the left of the 1 on your keyboard. It's like a back tick. You put 3 of those, and then you put a little curly bracket, and that'll initiate the creation of a code chunk. The first thing that you'll do is you'll tell it that the code chunk is in R by typing in R. And then you want to name the chunk. In order for Our Markdown to knit documents properly, each code chunk needs to have its own name. So this is going to be our new chunk. And there are additional options that can be added. You can see R is already trying to fill in these options. Most of them are unimportant. In this case, if I want to show the code chunk, you can have include equals true. That will show the code chunk. If you want to hide it, you can say include equals false, and that will hide your code chunk. You can close that with a curly bracket, create some space here, and then in order to close a code chunk, you just add 3 backticks. You'll notice that there was a change on my screen. I'll remove that. You can see that the code chunk expands if I just have, and now if I add those backticks, we now have a code chunk. And now this piece in our Markdown document will act just like an R source file like we were working before. We would use the pound symbol to create notes. It will no longer create headings. And we can put different steps of code in here. I'm going to scroll down and so does that make sense for code chunks for folks? Do people have questions about that?
Somebody was asking what actually is a code chunk. Wouldn't that just be a piece of code or a section of your code that produces output?
Yes. Thank you, Jamie, for that. So yeah, the actual like code within it will produce some sort of output. And I'm going to scroll through this and we'll see some examples of code chunks that I've created using the code that we went over in the last 2 days to create different outputs. That's a great question. I use R source files like the ones we use for part 1.r. just to like experiment with code that I'm working in, or like just test different analyses out. Because and one of the valuable things about the R source files, where it's just .r, is that you don't need to knit the document every time to see the analysis. You could just like really quickly, like we were doing, like highlight the code and click run. Whereas here, there's a little bit more infrastructure. So, but like I would say, when I'm let's say if it's like a lab notebook or something, where I'm doing different types of analyses throughout, I might do most of my work in an R Markdown document. This is one of the reasons why I really wanted to share this as part of the course, because yeah, when in practice, especially if I have some analysis that I want to show, it's much easier for me to show it in an R Markdown document than it is in an R source file. So I'm going to scroll through the code chunks that I've included in the part 2 document, and we're going to see some of the code that we worked in over the course of the last few days. Again, here's an example chunk. There's some additional things that you can add here. You can hide. We had mentioned that when you run code in R, it'll create either warnings or messages. You can hide warnings or show warnings. You can hide code chunks or show code chunks. In order to see all of the options, there's this little gear button, and you can see show warnings, show messages, use custom figure size. There's a bunch of different options that you can mess with here, and if you do want to change. But I'm not going to mess with anything here for now. Here's what I shared about headings earlier. There's an R Markdown cheat sheet as well. We're not going to cover that for now, but there are some formatting, useful formatting ways to format text. So I had mentioned earlier that the first step in almost all of your analyses is going to be to load the sorry, I got a little distracted here. The first step in almost all of your analyses is going to be to load the libraries important for your analysis. And so you can see here that I already have all of the library commands, and I load all the packages needed for this document. There is sometimes it'll include this like one line about knitter. Knitter is a package that gets loaded in order for our Markdown documents to work. If you went through the process of creating this untitled document, it should have loaded those packages already. So just if this is in there, just keep that and don't worry about it for now. If you want to run a code chunk, what you're going to want to do is, and you don't want to knit the document, you can just hit the little play button here, and it'll go through all of the lines of code in there and run them. So if I push that little play button, a little green bar will show up here, and everyone can push that play button as well. And it should load the libraries. If we go into the console, we can see that all of these operations were run. And if there's any errors or warnings, it would show up in the console, but it won't show up and do anything here in this code chunk. We'll see a little bit more of an interesting code chunk in a second.
Could you maybe elaborate on I've seen a couple questions. People wonder about using RMD files as opposed to regular R on a day-to-day basis. I'm not sure since.
Right. As I mentioned earlier, I do use R Markdown on a day-to-day basis, like when I want to like create reports to share with someone. But for my own like practice, I use our source files just to like test out code that I don't want to have in a report that I'm sharing. Another thing is that for our Markdown files, unless you have a very specific setting, they're not going to knit unless the code all works. And so if I don't know if the code is going to work and I don't want to include it in my R Markdown document, I'll use an R source file. I would love to hear from either Lee or Jamie in your own practice. Like, is that how, like, how do you use our Markdown files and our source files?
I'm not working with lab notebooks because I'm working more with social science data, and I tend to use an R source file and an R script with, and I can put notes in as comments because the way I'm working, I'm not necessarily producing a report. I might be looking at data and trying to, see if it needs cleaning, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say it depends what your plans are or what you're doing. I tend to like using like R files to experiment with code, like you mentioned too. But I ultimately like using R Markdown most of the time. That's just my preference because I really like how it organizes code and documentation, or it organizes Markdown and your code like, separately. And then once you publish it, it looks really clean. So, and then that way it's like you can, for example, publish it as an HTML file and share it with somebody, and they could see all of your documentation and your code too. So, and your visualizations.
Cool, thank you. Does that answer the question that came in from Patrick? Okay, awesome. All right, so let's take a look at some of the other code chunks that we have in here. So another thing that we did on the first day was we imported data and we selected columns for data. So I'm just going to show how these code chunks work. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to just completely clear out my my global environment. So this is the reason why I'm doing this is we have all of these objects that we created in previous sessions that might not be useful for this particular document. And so I'm just going to clear it out, and others can do this as well, so that we can see what the R Markdown is code chunk is doing when we import data. So what I have here is just copies of the commands that we ran in the first couple of days, and I'm just going to. So this is the COVID data set that we imported. This is the states data set that we imported and selected. This is the MMR vaccine rate data set that we imported from Tidy Tuesday. And if I just hit that play button, we can see that it just runs through all those importing steps, and you can see that they're all uploaded. For everyone who had that naming error for state and they're running on desktop, what you can do is you can just copy and paste the line of code where you correct that state name right below in this importing the states data set, and then rerun the code chunk. And you should, actually, you might want to do it before you select the columns. So you can put it in here, and that way you won't run into that naming issue for future sections. Awesome, thank you for dropping that into the chat, Saravana. So the next thing that we did was we did a bit of data wrangling and cleaning. So we learned to merge tables using the join commands. There's a variety of join commands that we talked about. You can use pipes to string together a variety of commands in dplyr or tidyr in order to create new columns using things like mutate, or there's some other ones like transmute. You can filter columns, you can remove values, you can filter them whether they're based on greater than or less than values. You can as I said, select and rename columns. We have a question that comes in. When you run code chunks, does it run each line one by one, kind of similar to a pipe? So it runs each like a code chunk like it would run an R source file if you ran it from top to bottom. The pipe works in a way so that you don't have to type that same data frame to do multiple commands into one step. So the pipe, so like, for example, if you wanted to do multiple dplyr steps without using pipes, you would have to indicate the original data frame that you're doing the analysis for every command instead of the pipes. And so especially if you have to do some like complicated filtering and selecting steps, or like creating new columns, you're going to need to use a combination of multiple lines of code plus sections where there are pipes. Does that answer the question, Deidre and Patrick? Awesome. And yes, to clear your environment, there's a little broom in the area. You could just like click on that and it'll clean it right up. So if you want to, like I said, if you want to run this code chunk, you can just push this little play button, and you'll see almost instantaneously it creates all the variables that we made for this particular chunk. So we did a variety of data visualizations as well. We did some filtering steps in order to optimize the data set for visualization. And then we used the Ggplot function to create a plot. So in this case, I could just push that play button and voila. In this case, Our Markdown will throw the plot in your Our Markdown window instead of in the plots folder. So you can see that it gets just created right below. If you want to get rid of it, you say it's like cluttering up your window. There's a little X. There's a really small X. Maybe it's a little hard to see, and it'll remove the output. And we can get back to our code chunk here. We also wrote code to do facet wrapping. So that is to create multiple plots at once, separating them based on certain categories. And we also created violin plots to look at data distributions. We can see here this plot. Are people still seeing the error with the stat summary function? Throw up a shocked expression if you're seeing that error, or drop a comment in the chat. If you're good, throw up a thumbs up. Okay, we got some thumbs. Right on. So we have a comment, can't get the error bars on the violins themselves. Are the error bars in like a random place, or are they just not producing? Are you getting an error? Oh, okay, on the side on the legend, but it's not appearing on the violins. Am I understanding that correctly? Oh, interesting. Definitely never seen that issue before. Oh, wow, look at that. No error and no bars on the violins for me too. Well, you know, as I had mentioned, there's a lot of approaches to do the same thing. It may be that just with your particular computing environment, or actually I should ask, is all this happening in RStudio Desktop, or is this in the cloud? Wow, interesting.
That happened to me yesterday, and after I downloaded HMISC, it worked fine.
Mm. Yeah, maybe people can try doing the install packages hmisc. I'll just, you could copy and paste this install. I think that was it. Maybe that will help for some folks. I know. Someone said, why is there no chunk name for violin plots? Hey, I missed a chunk name. We're gonna call this violin chunk. My bad. Thanks for observing that. I recommend everyone, oops, no spaces in chunk names. I recommend everyone adding violin chunk just to make sure that there is that name. It goes between the R letter and the additional messages. And I put a comma afterwards to separate the messages and such. So if people are still getting issues with the error bars, what I would recommend, just so that we can kind of, hmisc worked for some folks. Question, chunk names are not mandatory, they are optional. Oh great, it's working for people. That is awesome. So if it's still not working for you, what I would recommend is taking that stat summary line and just deleting that one line of code. And that way, like you're not gonna run into any errors when knitting the document. If you're looking for ways to add error bars, you can look either in the data visualization cheat sheet to see what some options are for visualizing error, or you can what I do, which is just do a quick web browser search of how to create error bars on the plot that you're trying to create it for. The question about chunk names being mandatory. So there cannot be two chunks with the same name. So if you don't name multiple chunks, then it will consider them as having the same name. And so it'll give you an error. I think this is probably the only chunk where there was no name. So that's why it's still knit. But if I have multiple with no name, then it probably would give me an error. So one of the things that I do when I'm writing in Our Markdown documents is I just copy and paste the whole chunk and then start editing the code if I'm creating similar plots. That is where I often run into errors because I will have a chunk with the same name. Okay. I'm glad it's working for folks. As I had mentioned, if it's not working for you, just remove that one line of code. It should work just fine. So do we have any questions? Oh, and then the last chunk that I have in here is the stats testing that we did. We did a little bit of t-testing. If you want to run that chunk, you can just push that play button. Select function not found. That means you have to load the Plier library. And you'll see the output for the t-test appears below, just like it would a plot. And you can hit that X to close it up. So if you see that functions are not found, it's generally because, or actually it's almost always because the library is not loaded. So you might need to, if you have a chunk, actually this is a really great time to cover that. If you have a chunk, so if something that you're doing in your Our Markdown document isn't working, and you have a chunk earlier in the document where that needs to be run in order for it to work, you can, so right next to this play button, there's this like green bar with an arrow pointing downward. This runs all of the chunks above that chunk. So we could just run all chunks above, and it'll run every chunk before then. And it'll, in this case, it'll run that library command, and it should make it so that the select function can be found. Does that fix your issue? let us know if you're still having any issues. So we're just about to hit the hour. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set us off in a 10-minute break. And at 10:10, I'm gonna set up the breakout rooms. And I'm gonna go over these instructions again after the break. But for the breakout rooms, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna give everyone an opportunity to create your own plot or collaboratively troubleshoot creating plots. What you're gonna do is you're gonna add some code into a code chunk here, and you can create any number of plots you want. I'm gonna give people some time to pick a plot. But anyway, I'll go over those instructions in a little bit more detail after our break. Let's take a break from 10 to 10:10 and regroup in 10 minutes. And I'm gonna stick around for a couple minutes to answer questions.
I don't want to be confusing, but how does our Markdown, is it similar to Latex in that you are creating, you're adding the code and then you're running it and creating like a new document and it's formatting the document the way you want it to be?
Yes. So so it's similar to Latex, but I would say that it's actually Markdown. If you've heard of Markdown, which is I don't know if I have a good description of Markdown. Lee, do you or Jamie, would one of you have a better description of Markdown?
Versus what were you saying?
Latex.
Oh, I'm not super familiar with. I've heard people call it latex too, but I can never know how to pronounce it. So I don't know how to describe the difference.
I've used Latex before, and basically it's like a type of like way to like structure and format text with like coding features. And our Markdown is kind of I would say like maybe a slightly simpler version of that. There are similar features where you can like bold things, add italics. There is like formatting things that you can do. And so it's similar in that way. But I would say Latex has a little bit more capabilities. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And as far as you know, is it possible to embed code in Latex, like the code chunks?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know.
I just wanted to clarify. Did you say, is it possible to embed latex into or code in Latex?
Yes. Is it possible to embed code chunks into Latex? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, well, I guess Ibrahim would know that better.
I've never used Latex for embedding code. I've only used it. I've like embedded images, but I've never tried to embed code.
I just didn't know if Latex was like, actually you answered my question because I was wondering if Latex was a more simple version, but you're saying Markdown is more simple than Latex.
Yeah, I would say Markdown is a little bit more simple. And I think one of the reasons is because it is capable of embedding the code, but I could be wrong. I know Latex is used for a lot of different things. And so the way that I've used that workflow is like I'll create like plots or images using my R source file or R Markdown file, and then I'll embed the images that I create into the Latex file separately.
Got it. Thanks.
We have a comment. There's no. Sorry.
I am not seeing a screen that looks anything like yours in my console.
Okay.
I have all the words are there, but the way the markup is not present.
For example, you're referring to like the
I don't see the gray.
The gray. Interesting.
The chunks.
Yeah, and you have an RMD file. It's like
part
open
two.rmd
directly from. And you're in the cloud?
No, I'm on desktop.
You're on desktop. Let me open up this file in my desktop and see how that looks. We have another question as well. There's no wheel, down arrow, nor play button in this particular chunk. I don't know what particular chunk you're talking about. There should be, if there's no code, there's probably nothing in there that you can run. But it sounds like you might be having a similar issue as William here. So I'm gonna, oh, okay, great, figured it out. I'm gonna open up my RStudio. 1 second. Oh, this is not the right one. So I downloaded it to my desktop. Part 2, opening it up. Going into part 2, opening the R project file. It's going to take a second to open. It opened up like here. And then I'm just going to click on the part 2.rmd. Let me change the color scheme so that it's probably more similar to yours. To edit your color scheme, you can go into global options, appearance, and I don't know what the default setting is. Classic.
I think I see my problem. I did not load the intro to r.rproj. I just went to part 2 RMD.
Oh, I see, I see. Then it would probably just open up in a text file in your R.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, perfect, perfect. Okay, right on. I'm glad that fixed the problem. All right, I myself, I'm gonna take a quick break and I will rejoin everyone right around 10:10. And we're back. All right. Hope everyone got their stretching in, bio breaks, all the necessary things that happen in hourly breaks. Cool. So, so I'm gonna give the instructions for our challenge for today a couple of times as people trickle in from the break. So the challenge for the breakout room sessions is to create your own plots, create your own visualizations using the data sets that we have. You can, I want to say that there are no limitations to what you can visualize. You can pick any variable from the data sets. For example, in previous sessions, I had folks create, let me just go to cases per million for a moment. I had people calculate the number of new positive cases per day, which there's a column in here. There's a lot of really interesting variables that are collected here. So feel free to take some time. Feel free to take some time to pick through the data set and see if there's a different a different type of filtering step you want to do, different type of calculation you want to do, different. Maybe you want to look at the 10 smallest states instead of the 10 largest states, or create your own list of states to visualize and plot in similar ways. You can also try using a different geometry in Ggplot, experimenting with different types of geometries. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put everyone in breakout rooms. I'm going to make them around maybe like 6 or 7 people in each room. And you can either collaboratively try to create your own visualizations, or if you want to work independently and let the group do their thing, you are welcome to do that as well. The helpers and I will, I'm going to say, go through the different breakout rooms and help if any questions come up throughout the challenge.
Are we able to I know you're the host, but are we able to?
So I've made all of the helpers co-hosts at this point, so you should be able to freely leave rooms and go into others. Let me make sure that we have another helper, Ashley Peterson, who joined us today. I'm going to also make her a co-host.
And then I just want to double check if everyone has the capability to like ask for help from the host, because usually you can in a breakout room. Yeah, so once I put people into breakout rooms, they're going to see within their Zoom bar a little ask for help feature. If your group needs help and you don't have a helper in your room, you can click on the ask for help button, and I will get, as a host, get a notification, and I can let the helpers know, or that a room is asking for help, or I can just go there myself if I'm not in the middle of something. I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment. Do folks have questions about the activity? Throw up a thumbs up if you're down to try to get your hands dirty with some more and create your own plots. All right. I'm looking for thumb-related enthusiasm here. Right on. Yeah. Okay. I love it. Love it. Love it. That was making me happy. So a couple of people have had to duck out or did not want to participate in the breakouts.
you can decline the invitation to the breakout room and you can touch base with me afterwards. But I'm gonna set these breakout rooms up. And create. I'm going to make sure that there's only one helper per room. So I'm going to set it so that people have 30 minutes to start in these rooms to figure out what type of data visualization you want to do and to create some new chunks and some new visualizations. Don't stop after one. If you have more time, challenge yourself. If you feel like you've gotten a really cool thing that we didn't cover in class, there's going to be some time to share some of the things that you worked on. And if you were just struggling the entire time, we'll also come back together after the breakout session and do some troubleshooting. So I'm going to open up the rooms and then was that?
And you want the helpers to switch rooms to see how people are doing?
Yes. Opening them up. Feel free to go into your room once you're ready. So the question was, is there a go-to resource as we embark on analysis? And what I was saying was, and I'll share my screen just to kind of point this out. One of the most useful resources that I have found is these cheat sheets. They'll give you a title for what the cheat sheet is about. And sometimes the title is a little ambiguous, but the description is usually pretty robust. And gives you a pretty good description of what to do or what to look for. Some of the ones that we talked about were the data transformation cheat sheet, manipulating tables, arranging things. Our Markdown, there's a cheat sheet for Our Markdown if you want to have a little bit more capabilities with your creating reports. There's a data visualization worksheet. Another one that I found useful or interesting. So if you work with a lot of text files, maybe DNA sequencing data, or just text that comes in from surveys or like whatever type of stuff, using Stringer works with character strings. It's really, really good for manipulating character strings, cutting apart character strings, and modulating them in a variety of ways. I use this one a lot. It took me a little bit of time to like figure out how to really like work with it well, but it's a really, really handy resource. And then we did cover dates and times with Libra Day a little bit. So that's one of the first places that I would go. And if I am looking, if I like am stuck and I'm like, okay, where do I start? What forum, like what, there's like, I'm gonna just Google search something, but I don't, how am I gonna know what's a reputable source? Like what's a useful place to look for troubleshooting code? Some of the most common places, they're usually forums or like blogs, but Stack Overflow is a really common place where people will post their problem on a forum and people will respond to it. Or if someone has already responded or asked a similar question, they might point you to that resource as well. There's Our Bloggers is another useful website you might come up with. If you're asking a question and someone asked it, that Our Bloggers is another place where people ask questions. And then for more bioinformatics workflows, maybe you're not working exclusively with R, but you're working with maybe a little bit of Python. You're working with some Unix packages that are in bioinformatics. BioStars is a really good place where you'll find some answers to questions as well. So those are usually my go-tos for finding help. So we have a question about how to filter multiple states using dplier. I'll show that really quickly. There's a couple of ways to do that. And I'll show, oops, where's my, yeah, workspace. I'm gonna have to reload the project. Give me just a second. Loading, loading. I'm going to share my screen again. All right. So let me just pull up the chat window so I can see the other questions that come up. If you want to filter for multiple states, you can do something like this. Let's see if we can go to. Okay, let's go from here. So let's say we're going to create a plot with this, but we're not going to. We're only going to use like 3 of the states from here. So we can go into our filtering step, and we can do a couple of things. So let's say, for example, we want to pick California and Florida, kind of like we did for our stats question. So I'm going to create a second filtering step, filter. And when I learned how to do this, I just searched how to filter for multiple items at the same time. And in this case, we're looking at the state column. And I'm going to look for California like this. And then in order to create like an inclusive, I don't know, like an inclusive filter or an additional filter, you can put a pipe, or I don't know, I shouldn't call this a pipe. It's like the horizontal or the vertical bar. It should be above your return key next to like one of the slashes. To shift, you add that bar, state double equals, and then Florida. And then I'm going to name this, I'm going to call this infection growth test to see if it worked without overriding our variable. And let's see if that gives us just California and Florida. So infection growth test. So now we can see California. Scroll through, and it should end with Florida at the bottom. So that's one way to filter for 2 things. But let's say, for example, you want to filter for 3 or 4 things, and you don't want to have to write this out over and over again. Another thing that you could do is you could create a short list of the states that you want to filter. For example, filtered, I'm going to create an object called filtered states. Have this little arrow here. And in order to create a list, you can use this C command, which is concatenate. We covered it a little bit in the session yesterday. And we can make our list of the different states. So California's in there, Florida's in there, Illinois maybe, and Ohio. And we can run this filtered states to create this object. So now we have this set of values here. And now we're gonna go back to this filtering step, and I'm gonna remove this double equals. So I'm gonna just edit this a little bit. And I'm gonna say %in%. So now we're looking in a particular object, filtered states. And now we should be able to filter for everything that's in this list: California, Florida, Illinois, and Ohio. Let's see if that'll run. I think that should work. So I'm going to call this infection growth test 2, just so that we don't erase the original test that we did. Problem with filter. Let me just double check to see that I wrote that correctly. Oops. Oh, actually that should work. Oh, did I mistype? Oh, I spelled it wrong. Filtered states. Thank you for that. And let's see if that'll run. Oh, it does. Infection growth test 2, we can see that there's more observations than the original test, which means more states were included. And we can take a look at that to see if we have California, we have Florida, we have scrolling, Illinois, and we have Ohio. So that's how you would do, you can filter based on lists that you find or create. You can also pick a column from a particular data frame. So let's say you have multiple data frames, you could just tell it what column. So if filtered states was a data frame, you could just tell it the column to search on. Filtered states. Okay. I hope that's helpful. Sorry, Lana. Awesome. How would we layer two graphs with the same x-axis but different y-axis variables? Two graphs with the same x-axis but different y-axis variables. That's a great question. I don't know if I would have to probably look that up. I'm not really sure how I would do that at this time. Maybe we can follow up on that question.
I think it would help to see the data, but yeah, maybe we could cover it separately.
Yeah.
Ibrahim, remember I was trying to do the populations and it kept like summing them instead of doing them on an individual day? Do you think we could maybe work on how to filter the day like that?
Sure. So let's go to...
Do you want me to copy paste what I have so far?
Sure. So I'm going to say that I'll hang out and continue troubleshooting for as long as people want. I do have to sign off like right at noon. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly give instructions for the students in 275 and 199 just to like get them set up. And if anyone wants to sign off and they're done with the session, you can feel free to sign off, but then I'll hang around and answer any additional questions that come up. Is that okay for folks? Throw up, yeah, we got a nod, we got some thumbs up, because I want to make sure that folks get their quiz and all that stuff set up. Okay, so the quiz actually has always been in our Markdown document that we created. If you just scroll all the way down to the bottom, we have the first set of instructions for this quiz. So what you're going to do is, and let me just pull up the rubric, which I will share verbally. Let me see if I have it. Sorry, y'all, one second. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a new code chunk below. You're going to actually create a heading indicating that it is the quiz. We're going to call it the quiz heading so that when I knit the document, I can easily find that heading. You're going to create a code chunk and you're going to call it quiz chunk. And you're going to create a plot, any visualization similar to the activity that we just did. Any visualization, either new, any data set that we've loaded, create a data visualization in there. If you include a filtering step, that's going to be some bonus points. If your code does not work at the end of it, type in 1 or 2 resources where you would look for help troubleshooting. I'll give some a bonus point for using the vaccines data set that we loaded from Tidy Tuesday. I'm going to send the exact rubric for the total number of points and how you can get all of the points to the 275 and 199 students immediately after this class. So you're going to get like all of the instructions that I just said written out, but you just put it into your Our Markdown document. You save that Our Markdown document with your initials, and you forward and you email me that Our Markdown file. If you do this by end of the day on Friday, so I'm going to set an 8 p.m. deadline. That's going to be written into the email. Send me that document by 8 p.m. on Friday, and you're good to go. Yeah, there's it's going to be a quiz where there's 10 points possible to get 100%, but there's like 15 points that you can possibly get. So you don't have to get all of the points, but and still get a perfect score. So that's that. Look in your emails for that. I'm going to send it no later than noon, and you should be good to go. So with that, I'm going to bring this session to a close for everyone who doesn't want to stick around for questions, but I'll be here to answer any questions that come up for the next 20 or 30 minutes. Thank you all so much for being here. I really, really appreciate the effort, the vibes. Good luck with your work in the future.
Yay, thanks, Ibrahim.
For the question, can we use any data set, or is there specific data that we need to work with? Use any of the data sets that we imported or that we worked in class today. That will make it so that I can load the data set when I open up your file later on and check to see if the visualizations work. Because if I don't have the data set, then I'm not going to be able to create the objects or get it to work. Cool. I'm gonna stop the recording now. Stop sharing for a second.